The federal crackdown on illegal immigration is starting to affect the Texas agriculture industry. Some farmers say their workers are too scared to show up for work. Somewhere in the heart of America, there are fields burning, not from drought or wildfire, but from landowners themselves setting fire to the last of their hopes. People are calling it the Great Farmer Exodus of America. Just in the past year, over 50,000 farms have been abandoned or sold off in desperation, all shaken under the weight of tariffs, input costs, and the rise of competitors. Meanwhile, across the border, Canada is experiencing an unprecedented agricultural boom. Land prices are surging, government subsidies are flowing, and people are flocking to the farms. What's really happening? Why are American farmers fleeing the very soil of their ancestors? And why is Canada smiling? Join me as we uncover 5 U.S. states where farmers are walking away from agriculture. Please note, all information presented is compiled from statistical data and is not intended to discredit any organization. Texas is setting its own fields on fire. In the summer of 2025, many areas of the Lone Star State have stopped waiting for rain. Farmers are burning wheat while it's still standing in the fields because there's no one left to harvest it, no factories to buy it, and no way to store it for tomorrow. But this isn't a decision, it's the bitter consequence of a relentless chain of pressures that Texas farmers have never faced before in this century. Texas has long been the largest agricultural state in the U.S., with over 250,000 farms stretching from central regions to the southern border. But in less than a year, more than 11,000 farms have shut down or shifted to other purposes. Part of this is due to out-of-control costs for fertilizer, fuel, and irrigation water. But another part comes from less mentioned factors like the severe labor shortage and the silent cracks between policy and reality on the ground. Since the beginning of the year, Texas farmers have been navigating overwhelming difficulties. Not only are they facing unfavorable weather, they also lack workers. According to local agricultural organizations, about 40% of farm laborers are immigrants, most of whom lack proper documentation. Since mid-2024, the situation has worsened with frequent surprise inspections. Some ranch owners in the southern part of the state report that, overnight, their entire workforce vanished, leaving behind silent barns and unharvested fields. Tonight, local farm worker advocates are calling out President Trump's directive, telling ICE to pause raids at farms, restaurants, and hotels. The labor shortage not only leaves wheat rotting in the fields but also affects dairy cows, which must be milked regularly every few hours. Some farms simply can't keep up and have had to forfeit their entire season. Meanwhile, the cost of using legal labor through the H-2A visa program has soared to over $20,000 per season, an unmanageable figure for many small and medium-sized farms. Faced with 2 dead-end options, many have no choice but to walk away. But labor is just the beginning of the story. When farming stops, land is gradually put up for sale, and the buyers are mostly not local. Many farms have been transferred to investment funds, including companies from Canada. Some of these plots are later used to build logistics centers and warehouses instead of continuing agriculture. Prolonged drought has made the situation even worse. Many wheat-growing areas, especially in the western part of the state, have been declared total losses. In regions near the Mexico border, the Rio Grande has dried up after the 2 countries entered a dispute over water rights. When the U.S. demanded that Mexico return the agreed-upon water quota, Mexico retaliated by reducing agricultural imports from Texas, shifting purchases to Canada instead. What was once a cooperative cross-border farming relationship has now turned tense, and the ones bearing the brunt are the farmers of Texas. Worse yet, regions not suffering from drought have faced erratic rain. In East Texas, heavy rain throughout May prevented many farmers from sowing on schedule. Seedlings drowned, tractors sat idle, and the entire season was delayed. In a sector where timing is everything, being a week late can mean losing the whole crop. The consequences are clearly visible in the numbers. As of mid-2025, total agricultural losses in Texas have surpassed $2.7 billion according to estimates by the Texas Farm Bureau, mainly due to crop failures, canceled export contracts, and soaring operating costs. Meanwhile, across the border, Canada has secured over $1.2 billion in new agricultural export contracts in Q2 2025 alone, largely by stepping in to replace US suppliers in markets like Japan, Mexico, and Europe. While Texas is struggling to hold on to every acre, Canada is quietly and effectively moving forward. The province of Saskatchewan, known for its fertile soil, is expanding agricultural settlement programs, attracting skilled growers from around the world. In May 2025, applications from the US, particularly from Texas and California, surged significantly. People who had spent their entire lives in the American South are now considering a fresh start in the cold North, where they receive technical support, have access to a stable workforce, and most importantly, feel heard. When farms shut down, the consequences ripple through entire communities. Property tax revenues drop sharply, slashing budgets for schools and hospitals. Some areas have had to shorten school terms, postpone mobile health programs, and raise fees. Elderly residents, once hopeful their grandchildren would have a better future, now face a harsh reality. No land, no schools, no clinics. The most alarming part is this: the next generation of farmers seems to be losing faith in the path of their ancestors. Many young people in Texas are choosing to leave the land for the city. Some switch to factory jobs in the auto industry, others enter services, logistics, or hospitality, anything but agriculture. For them, the farm is no longer a dream, it's a burden. They don't leave because they hate farming, but because they can't make a living from it. And how ironic it is, as Texas slowly lets go, its northern neighbor is expanding farmland, investing in exports, and signing contracts with partners once loyal to the US. Canada is ready to fill the gap America is leaving behind. And if Texas, the top agricultural producer in the nation, is being forced to retreat, then the question is, what will happen to the rest? If no one wants to farm anymore, who will be left to feed America? Once marked boldly on the global wheat export map, Nebraska has long been one of the most vital pillars of America's grain industry. From here, wheat was shipped to ports across the globe, from the East Coast to Europe, from the West to Asia. But by mid-2025, in fields once echoing with the sound of harvesters, an eerie silence has taken over. That silence doesn't come from natural disasters or sudden crises. It comes from something more ironic. Farmers have fled en masse. That shift became unmistakable after the recent NATO summit, when Spain was criticized for not increasing defense spending. Few imagined that event would make European grain traders wary. Some import corporations began backing out of contracts with US suppliers, turning instead to Canada, where prices were stable and trade policies were free from geopolitical disputes. It was an indirect but powerful blow, landing just as Nebraska was already struggling. For weeks, wheat prices hovered around $5 per bushel, too low to guarantee profit. Even with a good harvest, growers were forced to sell at a loss or store their grain in cold storage, waiting for a market rebound that might never come. With no market, credit also began to dry up. According to the Federal Reserve's Kansas City branch, local banks now only disperse loans with clear export contracts or price guarantees. For Nebraska farmers, both conditions are increasingly rare. As the market faltered, the familiar began to unravel. In June, reports from 14 counties confirmed the rapid spread of tar spot, a fungus that devastates crops, especially corn and soybeans. While it doesn't directly affect wheat, it threw entire cultivation plans into disarray, drove up pesticide costs, and disrupted planting across large areas. These pressures didn't come one by one. They hit all at once, with prices low, credit restricted, costs rising, and markets withdrawing. Farming became a problem with no solution. That's when many decided not to farm, not with declarations, but with very concrete actions. No loan applications, no repairing harvesters, no ordering seed for the next season. And Nebraska is not alone in feeling this. At the same time, northern Canadian provinces are ramping up wheat exports. In the first half of 2025, Canada exported over 6.6 million tons, more than a 20% increase year over year. Many contracts once held by US suppliers are now being signed with companies in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Market share hasn't vanished, it has simply shifted. Canada's logistics infrastructure has also seen heavy investment. The Port of Vancouver has expanded storage areas, interprovincial rail is prioritized for agricultural goods, and cooperatives receive operational subsidies to keep prices stable. These moves have helped Canada not just maintain, but reclaim the market space left behind by the US. Meanwhile, in Nebraska, the story goes beyond the wheat fields. The production drop has triggered a chain reaction across communities. As farms shut down, land tax revenue plummets. Local budgets, heavily reliant on agriculture, begin to fall short. Schools delay teacher hires, hospitals cut after-hours services, fire stations move to part-time shifts. Things once considered basic to everyday life are now growing fragile. That anxiety is hard to name. It weaves through sparsely attended co-op meetings, quiet farmers markets, and the hesitant way people speak about the next season. They haven't given up, but they're no longer sure they will continue. One thing is changing clearly: America's role in the global wheat supply chain. If Nebraska was once a cornerstone, today its fields are no longer named in major contracts. Even some food factories in the US have begun using Canadian imported wheat, where there's a price floor, minimal volatility, and on-time delivery. For many Nebraska wheat growers, the hardest thing to accept isn't crop failure or financial loss. It's the feeling of falling behind in a world that's speeding up. They can't see a clear path forward, while other countries have already signed contracts, expanded networks, upgraded ports, and built lasting ties with importers. And as Nebraska continues to wrestle with the question of whether to plant or not, market share keeps slipping away, without warning, without announcement. And as Nebraska retreats, other states in the grain belt are starting to feel it too. Kansas is seeing its first production decline after years of stability. North Dakota is struggling with access to the Chinese market. And Iowa, the nation's soybean hub, now faces a difficult equation of surpluses and market collapse. Nebraska's story is no longer just its own. It is a preview of what may come when an industry that once symbolized America begins to slow down, and the world doesn't wait. Once a land of opportunity, Arizona has now become the first place immigrants are pulling out from. For decades, Arizona was not only a destination for retirees, but also one of the rare promised lands for manual laborers, particularly within the immigrant community. From Yuma to Maricopa, Cochise to Gila Bend, farms growing lettuce, tomatoes, eggs, and greenhouse fruits created tens of thousands of seasonal jobs. With mild winters, a convenient border location, and a lower cost of living compared to coastal states, Arizona became the top choice for both poor Americans and undocumented immigrants seeking a better life. Yet by mid-2025, a paradox has become clear. Arizona, once a symbol of agricultural stability, now has the highest rate of agricultural abandonment in the country. Why would a place that seems to have it all, land, sun, experience, be the first to be left behind? The answer began earlier this year when Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE raids at the border surged sharply. Multiple local news outlets confirmed ICE had launched surprise inspections across numerous farms near Yuma, right at the peak of the winter vegetable season. The sudden disappearance of a large portion of the workforce stalled the entire chain, from harvesting to packing and transportation. Many farmers had to cancel orders because there was no one to pick the crops. Some even chose to abandon cultivation mid-season, unable to ensure delivery to domestic supermarkets. The labor crisis wasn't just about lacking people, it was also about fear. Even those with legal documentation began to worry about the growing uncertainty of working in an increasingly restrictive environment. And that's not all. Alongside the labor shortage, Arizona faced a severe water crisis. Since late 2024, counties like Pinal and Cochise were placed under strict water management zones. By mid-2025, many farm owners reported being prohibited from drilling new wells, while allocations from the Colorado River were being redistributed. Under such conditions, even with quality seeds and modern machinery, growers could do nothing without irrigation. The dual pressure of lacking workers and water forced many small farms, even long-established cooperatives, to shut down. Vegetable sorting lines in Yuma halted, refrigerated trucks stopped picking up goods, and the nightly farmers' markets, once the heartbeat of the region, began to empty of traders. But the feeling of abandonment came from elsewhere. Federal policy in the first quarter of 2025 saw several federal agricultural aid packages temporarily withheld from Arizona due to budgetary conflicts. At the same time, a mandatory avian flu vaccination policy led at least one major egg farm in Pinal to cull over 6 million chickens. The owner publicly protested, arguing that the disease control measure came without technical or financial support. Altogether, Arizona became one of the few states to lose all three critical elements of agriculture at once: labor, resources, and policy support. In regions that survive solely on seasonal harvests, the impacts go beyond the fields. When growers give up, warehouses lose clients, supply stores can't sell goods, childcare centers are understaffed, and adults have to quit their jobs too. A cycle of poverty begins to take shape. And strangely, it's the very people who once came here for manual labor opportunities who are now the first to leave. Some have moved to California for fruit packing jobs, others have quit farming entirely, switching to delivery work, car washing, or trying their luck in the cities. Some, a small but growing number, are now applying to go to Canada. Yes, Canada, once seen as having harsher weather and lower incomes, is now opening its doors to workers with agricultural skills. Programs like the Agri Food Pilot or the SINP Agricultural Worker Stream are currently reviewing applications from people with experience in gardening, greenhouses, or egg farming, exactly the skill sets Arizona's workers possess. And the biggest irony is beginning to show. Americans are leaving America to keep farming because Canada offers subsidies, crop insurance, and an open immigration policy. Not every farmer qualifies to go, but even the mere thought of considering it is already a warning sign. If you've witnessed America's many transformations, this shift evokes a hard-to-describe emotion. Farmers here have lived with the belief that the US was the final destination, the place to come build dreams. Now, as they watch laborers leave to survive elsewhere, the feeling is not just of loss, but of a profound reversal. Many older Americans once saw waves of immigrants arriving in Arizona, new homes rising, fields bustling. They were once skeptical, once worried, but eventually got used to the sight. But now, as those very people leave, taking with them their skills and belief in the land, what's left behind is not just an empty field, but a void in the heart of the community. And the saddest part is, this isn't just happening in Arizona. From California to Iowa, from Texas to Nebraska, pieces of American agriculture are beginning to crack, and the list is still growing. If it were just a year ago, no one would have believed that Canada, a place where winter snow lasts half the year, a country once absent from the temperate fruit game, could overtake one of America's most fertile agricultural valleys. Yet by summer 2025, British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan have not only expanded their fruit-growing acreage, but are also exporting directly to the US market, once dominated by California farmers. In British Columbia, yields of cherries, apples, and white peaches have increased by more than 30% compared to the same period in 2024. Saskatchewan has begun operating medium-scale greenhouses for off-season, year-round production. The Canadian government has rolled out electricity subsidies, crop insurance, and agricultural stabilization funds, enabling farmers to plant, harvest, and export without resorting to price dumping. Meanwhile, Central Valley, a region that once accounted for nearly a quarter of the US's fresh fruit output, is struggling with a puzzle no one can solve: how to farm without profit. According to reports from the California Farm Bureau, electricity costs for pumping water to grape, peach, and orange farms have risen over 150% since 2023. Many farmers have had to halt irrigation mid-season because they couldn't afford the power bills. At the same time, groundwater protection laws have prohibited hundreds of farms from drilling new wells, even as surface water sources have dried up. On top of that, new regulations on methane emissions, industrial dust, and noise pollution are forcing farmers, especially those near residential areas, to submit extensive environmental reports and even reduce planting areas to stay within emissions quotas. Meanwhile, agricultural property taxes continue to rise, piling more pressure on growers even when they're no longer turning a profit. As of June 2025, over 45% of medium-sized fruit farms in Central Valley are operating below the break-even point. Some farmers have been forced to pivot to agritourism, organizing orchard tours and fruit-picking experiences. However, revenue from such activities only covers a small portion of operating costs, not to mention the requirements for insurance, labor, and landscape maintenance. Worse still, with Mexican avocados flooding the market at prices lower than the growing costs in Ventura, local farms have lost all competitive edge. Peach lots once exported to Asia are now sold domestically at low prices or not harvested at all due to cost constraints. Consumers in California, even longtime residents connected to the land, now walk into supermarkets and choose kiwis from Chile or apples from New Zealand simply because they're cheaper than local produce. Central Valley is losing its footing not just because it's falling behind in global supply chains, but because the younger generation no longer wants to farm. Many children of farmers have shifted to tech, logistics, or services, not because they reject tradition, but because the profession no longer provides a stable livelihood. In contrast, Canada is opening immigration programs for people with agricultural experience, regardless of nationality, focusing only on skills. Provincial governments are welcoming in terms of land allocation, cooperative development support, and maintaining stable price floors. For the older generation in Central Valley, those who once lived through the region's buzz during orange harvests, this shift brings a quiet sorrow, the loss of a livelihood, a lost generation of successors, in a fading place on the global agricultural map. Now they no longer ask, what should we plant next season? But instead, is there anyone left to plant at all? And when fruit, once a symbol of abundance, becomes a luxury item in supermarkets, perhaps the greatest concern is not the price itself. It's how many other regions will follow Central Valley's path, leaving behind nothing but farm tour signs and memories of harvests past. Let us move on to the final name on today's list, a state loyal to traditional agriculture, where even the most diligent farmers could no longer hold on. If there were ever a place that symbolized American family farming, it would be Iowa. With rows of silver silos glinting in the sun, cornfields stretching to the horizon, and tractors passed down through 3 generations, it was once called the food heart of America. But by mid-2025, that heart is beating weaker. No storms have struck, no historic drought has occurred, only a quiet crisis, the gradual collapse of the family farm ecosystem. Once the leading corn exporting state in the US, Iowa helped place America at the top of the global agricultural map. Between 2005 and 2015, corn and soybean production here accounted for nearly 16% of the national total. But in just the past 18 months, the state has lost over 7,800 farms, around 16% of all US farms caught in the exodus of 50,000 people leaving agriculture, not due to a lack of land, but a lack of faith in a profession that once sustained generations. The problem didn't begin with a shocking event, but with small issues that kept piling up. In early 2025, the entire state averaged only 4 to 5 workable days per month in the fields. Intermittent rains interrupted planting. At the same time, many Iowa counties began detecting an outbreak of tar spot, a fungal disease devastating corn, spreading on an unprecedented scale. These weren't fatal blows, but repeated hits to farmers' patience. When the weather doesn't cooperate, the season gets delayed, but costs don't pause. According to FarmDoc data, the number of Chapter 12 farm bankruptcies in Iowa surged in the first half of 2025, ranking among the highest in the country. Agricultural credit loans, once a lifeline between harvests, are being tightened by banks, not because farmers lack determination, but because their balance sheets are no longer convincing. Fertilizer prices remain over 30% higher than in 2023, while corn and soybean prices are suppressed by large procurement contracts from companies like ADM and Cargill, which can easily undervalue raw commodities while controlling export outputs. The economic loss for Iowa's agricultural sector from early 2024 to mid-2025 is estimated to exceed $2.7 billion, according to reports from the state's Department of Agriculture and local ag credit groups. More notably, most of the losses are borne by small and medium-sized farms, the backbone of the family farming ecosystem. Meanwhile, Canada, particularly Saskatchewan, reported Q2 2025 grain export revenues exceeding $1.6 billion, up 34% year over year. But what drove many families to stop farming wasn't the red ink on the balance sheet. It was the feeling of being trapped. With 85% of Iowa's farms family-operated, what's lost isn't just income, it's identity. Some farming communities have even been indirectly impacted by immigration policies. Recent ICE patrols have made seasonal workers wary of showing up. Even without raids, the lingering anxiety has pushed away even legal labor. In an agricultural supply chain already understaffed, this has delayed harvests, leading to stockpiles and diminished crop values. Among all these factors, the most corrosive is psychological. When a profession built on pride, tradition, and faith becomes a mental burden, that's when its practitioners start to feel isolated. According to the CDC, farmers face above-average levels of psychological stress, especially in the post-pandemic period of price volatility. But instead of succumbing to despair, many Iowa communities have started to push back. In Story County, a group of small cooperatives has begun offering free mental health counseling for farmers, paired with career workshops for youth wishing to remain in rural areas. In the state's southern counties, advocacy groups are piloting community farming models where multiple families pool land, share equipment, and distribute risk. These solutions don't immediately fix profit margins, but at least they restore a sense of solidarity, something many say vanished after waves of large-scale land acquisitions. On the policy front, the federal government announced a mid-sized support program for family farms in May 2025, including streamlined credit procedures, interest subsidies, and incentives for regenerative agriculture models. Yet local associations argue that the policies arrived too late. In many cases, farmers had already sold their equipment, mortgaged their land, or simply walked away before aid arrived. The issue isn't a lack of money, but a lack of trust in a system that once promised to protect them. And while Iowa struggles to salvage its family farmlands, Canada to the north is surging ahead. Provinces like Saskatchewan and Manitoba are expanding soybean and wheat exports, commodities Iowa once dominated. Canada's crop insurance programs, equipment investment funds, and especially its rural settlement strategy are attracting both immigrant labor and American farmers abandoning their former lands. This isn't a mass migration, but it's a real shift from once leading Iowa to being left behind in the race to secure agriculture's future. When you walk into a small diner on the outskirts of Des Moines, you might notice empty chairs, not because no one's eating, but because the people who once sat there are now trying out other jobs. No more laughter after a long day in the field, no more talk about next season's planting depth. It's the silence that remains the thing farmers fear most, not because it's loud, but because it lingers. But Iowa still has options. Community initiatives, new policies, and especially flexible production models, if scaled up, could help preserve some of the soul of family farming. The lesson from this decline isn't meant to stir regret, but to remind us no system, no matter how strong, can survive if its people no longer have a reason to believe. And if Iowa once taught the world about sustainable farming, perhaps now it's time for the world to return the favor and help Iowa endure. 50,000 farmers leaving the profession. It might sound like a dry statistic, just another data point on the evening news. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. Behind each person is a family, a once thriving field, a generation that once believed farming was a calling. Now they're abandoning their land because they've been forced to choose between survival and professional pride. Meanwhile, Canada is opening its arms to those who still long to cultivate, who still believe in the true value of the land. They're signing billion-dollar contracts, toasting to record harvests. Over the past 10 years, the agricultural landscape has fundamentally shifted, and America is no longer guaranteed its place at the top. This isn't just about farming, it's about the future of food security, rural communities, and the American dream itself. When the backbone of our food system starts to crack, we all feel the effects, whether we realize it or not. What do you think about this dramatic shift in American agriculture? Have you witnessed these changes in your own community, or do you have insights from the farming world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives help shape future content. If this video opened your eyes to what's happening in rural America, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that matter but often go untold. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming analysis of how this agricultural exodus is affecting food prices across the nation. And remember, these aren't just statistics. They're real families, real communities, and real consequences. The more we understand these changes, the better equipped we are to address them. Please note that this video does not promote division within the United States or encourage any form of separatism. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and sparking constructive discussion based on current events and social trends. We respect the U.S. Constitution and all federal regulations.